I don't know, ever since I moved out of Champaign, I've definitely felt the loss of like the community I had here in the music scene.
This is Champaign is Also a Band podcast. One songwriter, one song. I'm Sven, your host for a journey into the music of Champaign-Urbana. Recorded in the Blue Box studio with a songwriter from the Champaign-Urbana music scene, past or present. Champaign is Also a Band podcast is proud to be a part of the Champaign Showers Podcast Network. Welcome to Champaign is Also a Band podcast. Today, I have Joe Carr. And you may know Joe Carr from solo projects as Monum. And he's currently in a band called Godzilla Nether Portal. But you may also know him from his current band, Decapitation in the Food Court. So, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
Today, we're going to be listening to their song, Scandinavian Wahhabism, off of the album What If We Had No Money and Just Shared Everything. Without further ado, let's listen to the song. welcome back. So, Joe, of course, my first and favorite question to always ask is, what came first? Was it the music or was it the lyrics?
So usually with the Decap song, it's almost always the music, but they kind of play off one another at the end. Occasionally, like, I'll have lyrics that are written down and then I formulate them later into something that fits along with that music. Occasionally, I'll have long lyrical passages that actually stay in the final song. But in this case, I just wanted to write a black metal song. On the last album, we had a crazy metal song with a rapper that we're friends with, Boy Ponder. That was really fun. And so I wanted to do the same thing, like carrying on the tradition. I mean, it's only 2 albums, not really a tradition, but I wanted to also have like a genre-bending metal song. Yeah, I just kind of was like, okay, I'm going to make this black metal riff. We're going to do some klezmer stuff. We're going to put hardstyle kick in it and probably some noise breakdown at the end. And because I was listening to a lot of different songs that had those different elements and I just wanted to do something like that. So, and then afterwards I decided I wanted the song to be about what it was about, and then I wrote all the lyrics.
How did this song start? So if you started with the music, are you sitting on the guitar? What was the first part that you came up with for this piece?
So I write all the songs for Decap. The way I usually start is with the guitar. Originally, I was a guitarist in Decap. Now I just do vocals live. In the studio, I do keys. At least for this album, I did keys, guitar, and vocals, and like all the synths and the mixing and stuff. I started with that first initial guitar riff, and then it kind of went from... I think I also had the like klezmer part, like I did that, but that's pretty simple. Like I just knew I wanted to do that in a song. So, and then yeah, the rest was kind of gluing it together. I think the thing that came last was the noise part in between, where it's like a lot of like weird stuff going on. Like that was the last thing that happened.
One of the things that sticks out to me, at least in this piece, and I'm wondering if you wanted to speak kind of to the overall, I guess you want to say, Decapitation at the Food Court mode or writing style. There's a lot of shift ups in terms of what's going on. And would you characterize that as something that Decapitation does in general, or?
This is honestly something I do. So even when I was doing stuff with Monum, before that I was writing traditional songs, but basically for years I haven't written a normal song. Like it's been all sweet compositions. And since the first album, the whole thing about switching genre and switching moods very quickly and suddenly, that was always something I wanted to do. And I think it definitely characterizes the album we just put out to an extreme. Like with the first album, there was definitely some switch ups, but for this one, it's like there's a song like on the album called iPhone Vuvuzela 100 Billion Dead. The titles are crazy too, but on that song, like I swear there's like 9 or 10 different parts. It's just like disgusting how many like different things I put in that song, and I think it became a bit excessive at some points. I tried to like make it listenable, but at the same time, I really want to bring that sense of like absolute insanity where like you really can't latch on to anything because it's like changing so much, inspired by like the dynamism of like emo and screamo and all that things, but kind of also taking influence from Mr. Bungle and types of bands that just do everything at once, and with all like very progressive style bands.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you communicate that to the rest of the band in order to put the composition together? Because I feel like, I guess in my mind I'm like, well, okay, at this point we're going to be in 4/4, and then in this section we switch up, so we're a little bit more allegro, but it's about 12/8 time, and then over here we get into this nice little 7/8, and I'm just kind of curious about how that communication in order to put together a piece, because there's 5 people, is that right?
There's 7 now.
7. Oh, okay. Thanks.
Well, the way it works, as far as like time signature and keys, it's kind of annoying for the rest of my band members, and I'm very sorry about this all the time, but I have very little musical like knowledge. I've learned piano as a kid and like retained some of that theory knowledge, but like ever since I was younger, I really like to play things by ear, and I would like purposefully not care about learning theory or any of that. I just like was very conscious that I just didn't want to do that ever since I was a kid. I know time signatures, like I know the basics of that and certain keys, but beyond that, like it's very difficult for me to convey the ideas to my band members, and it is something that like is probably the hardest thing about Decap, is like taking, I think, just the unfiltered creativity that I have and like distilling it into a way where I can make it playable live, because on the recording I can control everything, so it's like it's pretty straightforward, but live it is definitely a challenge. But I think people enjoy watching that like barely held together challenge of playing these songs live. Sure. Part of the fun. Yeah,
because it kind of goes around. I feel, yes, there's a definite theme running through it, and I kind of took from like the title and obviously the lyrics, it's kind of that, I want to say it's partially about this contradiction of kind of our own, I'm going to just kind of say our white bread kind of American, I don't know, just maybe even privilege, but this decision of we get the opportunity to be privileged Americans, but yet in the same tone, we will behave in a way that we always accuse the others of doing, and others just refers to anybody that quote unquote is not American, whatever that means in whatever context. I'm just curious about the writing of the music, how that tends to influence the direction that the lyrics head, and then maybe even once the addition of the lyrics that you make certain decisions writing wise. I want to throw out what I think of as possible example is there's that moment in between, I call it the base walk line section, which is, oh, she's the sweetest Gulf state North Korean. And then before it transitions into I'm headed to the embassy. But that part where you have this, so we don't have to give a fuck. It feels like that was something that was there. And I don't know, it felt like you might have written the music afterwards to match a dying character in a game. Wah, wah,
oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sound.
Wah, 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 wah. And so I didn't know if that was something that had already been previously written, or the lyrics and kind of the intention of where it was headed was what influenced the writing of it. So in a weird way, I just asked the influence of both the lyrics on the music and the music on the lyrics. So I'm curious how you balance those.
I think it's pretty unconscious now that I think about it, but it makes sense that I wrote the lyrics about what I wrote it about, given the music. I think the song has the most influence from other music from across the world. It's kind of a shameless redo of Ars Moriendi by Mr. Bungle, which I've already mentioned before. But they have this song which is a metal song coupled with Arabic folk music, and that's what kind of inspired me, the riffs, as well as the klezmer stuff, which is traditional Ashkenazi music. There's a band Black Country New Road which I really like, and they do a lot of mixing that with their progressive art rock music. So it was that, and then also black metal is a very Norwegian thing. There's even the fact that the part you were talking about, so we don't have to give a fuck, the raising scale. That's something I heard. I was in Taipei for 4 months for a study abroad. That's something I heard this Taiwanese band do, very similar. And I just at that moment when I heard them doing I need to do something like this, in a song where it's a kind of slowed down, scale going up. It just sounded so cool. I'm I need to do this. So there's influences from 20 different countries in this song, and it's very fitting that I wrote it about globalism. Even though, I didn't think about it that way, but I think it just in my head, I kind of understood that on a basic level. I think sometimes, especially when it comes to samples, because I do a lot of sampling, a lot of interpolation, I like to think of all of Decap music as a pastiche of every single thing I've heard. It feels almost unoriginal way because there's so many things I'm taking, but the influences are so diverse that you can't tell what's what. I sometimes think I want to write a song like this or I want to write a song like that, but oftentimes the lyrics and the music will affect the other to the point where it becomes completely different from what I intended it to be.
Let's talk a little bit about your singing style.
Yeah.
So how do you decide about switching from... I am terrible at talking about some of the more of the hardcore vocal styles, as it were. You've got gutturals, you got... The one that you mentioned earlier was okay, I could hear that. The way you said it, named it the death. Is it
the death growl? But death I don't growl. Think I'm probably gonna get hate from some purists. I don't think that's the right term because with my vocal style, I have no training, zero training in vocals. So a lot of my screams are literally just me screaming.
Sure.
People who do actual hardcore vocals the correct way are not screaming. They're using vocal fry, or they're using, false chords. I've tried for months to be able to do that, or honestly years at this point. I just can't do it. I don't know if it's because my voice is messed up from doing that for so many years or not. It's something I was never able to do, and I like the sound of raw screams better anyway. I know it's not good for you, but I haven't gone on tour yet, so hopefully I can figure it out before then. I guess for me, the way I decide between what I'm gonna do where, again, it could be just sometimes I hear for example, I added some high screams to some other songs, not this song, but I added some high screams at the very end of recording this album because there's a screamo band Ulf, which makes really good use of high screams in New York. And yeah, I just heard that. I'm like, I want to do high screams too, basically. And as far as like the lower vocals, I feel like it's just when it's more of like the churny, like metal-y stuff, like I like to do a harmony of the low and the high, because if you're just in the middle, it kind of clashes with the guitars as far as like EQ.
Sure.
So sometimes it's just like practical. Other times it's like, oh, I heard someone else do this, it sounds cool. And other times it's just kind of how I feel it should be done. Some of the vocals are completely different live and recorded too, like because I lose my voice as part of it. Like I end up just doing a lot of spoken word. Like in the beginning track, like New Media Mastermind of this album, like I did a version screaming and I did a version singing it. And the singing one sounded better, so I just choose that one. Like sometimes I just do both and then see which sounds better.
What were the first lines that you wrote? Did you start at the beginning, or did you the audience can't see you nod. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So I think with most every song, occasionally I'll have snippets. So I have like a journal of like snippets of things that I think of, usually when I'm sleeping or waking up. I'll borrow from those occasionally for lyrics, but usually the way it works is like straight front to back. Same with the music. Okay. Like I'll come up with the first thing and then just continue on to the next until the end. But occasionally it goes out of order. So I think for this song, I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I just wrote like going straight across.
I'm curious about the self-image, self-reliance, self-confidence section. It does seem like it's something a little bit outside of the overall, although how do you say that? You had mentioned earlier, and I'm just doing this as a clarification because you mentioned, did you say you called this like a suite? Like as in terms of like a...
Well, I'm probably not using that term correctly.
Oh, no, but I liked it. I liked it as kind of an image, whatever. It's whatever you call things, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't... I mean, language is used to convey an idea, a thought, create an image. I was like, that's a great way of putting it, right? Because it's this combination of different things, but they all have their own section.
Yes.
So as a suite, as that idea of having a suite that has different compartments that get put together that create a environment. And I'm trying to say this in not a way that sounds insulting, but I'm just like, to me, it feels like a very jarring, which...
it's meant to be jarring.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And so I'm curious where that came about, because it's very like, okay, now we're going to stop for a little dance beat kind of thing. Like, I'm still having... The last episode was, it was EDM based, hip hop. So I was thinking about, that drum and bass kind of thing going on, and it just brought me back to that moment. But then I'm like, but it also has that industrial, like Ministry and et cetera kind of sound to it. So I'm curious about how that came about in terms of the writing.
So the lyrics... What I mentioned before about sometimes having snippets of things, that whole self, like basically different words that begin with the self prefix, that was something that I encountered in my study abroad training about. It was a paper. I actually did do the training on like, like a lot of students just don't do it because it's boring. I found it somewhat interesting sometimes. There was an article we read about what do other people think of the stereotypes of Americans? And one of them is that we are very focused on ourselves because we have so many words that are like self-X, where like those are not really translated well into other languages. So like, yeah, that's kind of what I was basing the idea on as far as lyrically. And then musically, initially I think it fit a bit more because there wasn't any of the noise, but I just kept adding more and more because I was like, I want to make this more and more weird. And I actually got my friend Bluminous, who's Phil, I guess is his real name, Bluminous, who works with like Quiet Coyotes, which is a group that kind of spawned out of hip hop collective Hideout. But he was telling me, I've been getting into harsh noise and I don't listen to much harsh noise. Like I'm very pedestrian as far as that goes. I don't know many people who do, but I was like, let's put some harsh noise on here. Like, why not? I sent the track to him and he put some noise on it. And then I also added some samples. I just kept making it weirder and weirder. Like I did some weird effects on the kick and stuff like that. And I was like, sounds great. I think it was just the result of like me repeatedly like going back and like revising it like 10 or 20 times, where at first it was just kind of like that bass bone on and then the kick, and it was kind of a break. It then became less of a break and more of an absolute assault on the ears. So was
it self-produced, self-recorded?
Yes. So
okay,
the self-reference.
So self-recorded.
Yes, I've been doing music for a very long time. Since middle school. I mean, I worked on like video game stuff and lo-fi hip hop in middle school. But yeah, pretty much since then I've been writing, mixing, recording my own music. So yeah, I think this is the first album I'm kind of like okay with as far as it sounds. I think before I was still learning, and I am still learning now, but I'm very satisfied with the way this one sounds. But yeah, I do everything myself.
With that in mind, I find it interesting some of the mixing choices you made in terms of where you put the vocals.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this kind of, I want to say there's a spot at which, you know, the vocals are definitely on the surface of the ocean, but then there's a spot where they kind of dive down and they're in the same with the background, or should I say the accompaniment. And I'm kind of curious how you think about the vocals kind of diving in and out in that context. The idea is like, I always feel that I'm, you know, maybe more lyric driven, you know, especially if you're doing the singer-songwriter thing. But I'm just curious about that choice. Obviously, your lyrics have a lot of punch, and the accompaniment backs that up well. But so I'm just curious about that choice, because I've talked to other people about this as well, but I'm curious about your take on that choice.
So I am also very lyrics forward compared to other like screamo and like, well, we're not really screamo, but I'm trying to think of like intense bands like metal, like their lyrics are almost inaudible sometimes. Like Ulf that I mentioned earlier, like you cannot tell what she is saying. But for me, I do like to have the lyrics a bit more forward, because if I'm honest, like I think the thing that I feel most confident about in my songwriting is writing lyrics. It's always something that I want to make sure is like prevalent in the mix, because the lyrics are very important to me. In that particular case, in like the noisy part, I added that effect later on of like the going in and out. It's a flanger, I think. Flanger and a phaser and something else on top. Just going in and out. Because I feel like in certain cases, I do feel like the lyrics are less important than what's going on in the background. And like going in and out is kind of emphasizing the repetitive nature of it. Like I don't repeat myself a lot. I mean, because there's no chorus and none of that. Right. But when I am repeating myself, I feel like it's more for an effect rather than for, it doesn't matter exactly what I'm saying. Right. So that's kind of why I chose there to just have it be part of the mix. There's also so many cool, tiny little things in that mix. There's a recording of, you know, someone, a protester in Hong Kong singing the national anthem. Like, there's so many random things in there. I don't think the listener could really understand that unless, like, I tell them, but I kind of want them to at least, like, kind of hear all the different colors and the painting, so to speak.
You know, not that we're talking on, like, a subliminal message kind of level, but there is a certain context that you can kind of create by having, what is it, kind of, I almost equate it a little bit with like some of the effects that they'll use within like a horror movie or something, where they'll use something that references what was the, I don't know, please don't at me, but the only thing I can think of right now is, I think it was in Ghost, when the person was swallowed up. What they did is they took babies crying and slowed it way down. So I don't know if there's like this sense of like somehow innately, instinctually, we're like, oh, that is a sound of something bad happening, or someone suffering, or someone that's just trying to communicate but cannot in normal words. And so I don't know, but I'm going to have to listen back to see if I can hear that. And I think that's going to be I'll have to listen with some headphones kind of thing. Yeah. Awesome. What is your favorite part in the song?
Man, that's like choosing like a favorite son or like a favorite daughter. It's very difficult for me. Well, to be fair, I mean, okay, I can try to think. So I do honestly like, although it's somewhat one of the simplest parts of the song, I really like the like beginning part where it's just straight up like heavy, like black metal, like delayed vocals. Like I love that part. I just think that part, I just love like the chords I use. It's just so visceral and like heavy. And then I like the part where after that too, where it's like the call and response, like shoveling powdered protein. Like I just like the lyrical dichotomy I made, and like I like that part just mainly because of the lyrics. Yeah. And
so that's kind of what I called the bass walk
that
line
part,
or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not exactly a walk line. You know, I write my notes quickly as I, you know, just to get it down. I was thinking about the like different sections, but I actually, even though it sounded like I thought it was an odd change, I do actually like the bass drum dance syncopated industrial with the self-image, self-reliance on like a musical level. And I think it's like this cool switch up and then it just dives right back into the heavy. So on like that musical level, that I appreciate that kind of break and gives you a redirect a little bit. But I want to say on the whole, I like that there is that dichotomy that you're talking about. But even specifically, I like we are the richest foreigners from the oddest shaped borders. Surely that must challenge our domestic assumptions to build more inclusive barrier against the unwashed poor or the unwashed masses. Borders are such an arbitrary thing that we get all bent out of shape about. And to me, I thought there's that whole like odd shaped borders. It's just like, it's just meaningless. I mean, unless you're going to go along like a river as a border.
Yeah.
Like, what does that even mean? And then just kind of we are the richest foreigners, right? Because we always assume we can just cross over whatever those borders are with, impunity. And I don't know. I just felt, the inclusive barrier, I appreciate those kind of plays back and forth in the words. And so I would say that those are my favorite parts in the song. So of course, why did you pick this song to be the song you wanted to talk about today?
It's actually pretty simple. So there were 2 singles from this album. The first one, initially when I released it, had a very uncleared, very long Little Uzi Vert sample. And so I was like, let's just do this one. But honestly, if I could choose from the album, I might have chosen something else. But I do like this song. I put it as a single for a reason. I think there's always a lot to talk about with any of my songs, and I figured like any of them would be great to talk about. So, but this one just didn't have an uncleared sample.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for that, by the way. Yeah.
I do like to leave like pretty much everything I'm saying up to interpretation. I mean, obviously this is a political song, but I think you could get a lot of different things out of it depending on, your beliefs. I mean, 2 people who disagree with each other might think this song is about 2 different things.
Right.
So I don't like to explain why I was thinking about, I mean, if someone asks me, like I can explain, but yeah, I think the way you talk about it is interesting. It's interesting to see what people think of like what I write. And it's just interesting to see like my words out of someone else's mouth. It's very peculiar, but
I was going to say sorry about that. I always manage to like butcher people's lyrics.
No, you did a great job.
Well, that's a first, trust me. Champagne is also a Band podcast is proud to support Jubilee Cafe. Jubilee Cafe is a free weekly meal program at Community United Church of Christ, 805 South 6th Street in Champaign, Illinois. Jubilee Cafe serves a home-cooked meal from 5 to 6:30 each Monday. Their mission is to feed hungry people by cooking healthy, delicious meals and by serving their guests restaurant-style with servers waiting on tables. Jubilee Cafe is open to anyone who cares to eat with them. Because food insecurity among students is so high, they serve students as well as others in and around the Champaign-Urbana community who struggle with hunger. Meals are free to all and will be served each Monday evening. Located in the accessible lower level of the building at 6th and Daniel Streets in Champaign. For more information on the meal or how to volunteer, go to the Jubilee Cafe CUCC Facebook page or email them at jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org. That's jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org. Welcome back. So, of course, Joe, what is your favorite Champaign-Urbana venue?
It's hard for me to decide between the Mirror and the Spice Rack. Both of them have very good reasons for being my favorites. I'll just say both.
Okay.
Don't want to make anyone mad. But,
I mean, it's really. I should preface that with like just name your favorite venues. That's all cool.
Okay, yeah. Mirror and the Spice Rack, I gotta say, as far as DIY goes. As far as non-DIY goes, we haven't had much of a chance to play anything besides Rose Bowl, but Rose Bowl is great. And Rose Bowl is great for the reasons everybody knows. I mean, they're just good. Like, they're just good venue.
I have not been to the Spice Rack and I have not been to the Mirror. I kind of look at my age and I'm just like, I just don't want to be that old guy. That
people's dads go to shows like.
Oh, okay. Like, I'll just pretend I'm somebody's dad.
Yeah, no,
totally. Everybody believe that.
I can say you can say you're my dad. I mean, I'll do that. It's fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, but see, that would have to be that I would have to pretend that, and that would mean I'd admit to my age. Anyway, so what stands out in your mind as like special shows at the Mirror and at the Spice Rack?
The one that really sticks out at the Spice Rack was our first show ever, which was there. So that obviously is just sentimental. We've never been the best live band as far as like being held together. Our songs are just difficult, and it makes sense. We also just don't practice because a lot of us are busy with other things. I was a CS major at U of I. That wasn't why I was busy. I was doing a lot of other stuff, but that was part of it, I guess. Our band is like half like engineers, I think. So a lot of us were just busy with school. So yeah, I mean, but that being said, like even if it definitely was not the best show we've ever played. Like I dropped my guitar like I think 4 or 5 times.
Strap locks. Strap locks.
Yeah, and then we got strap locks after that. That was why. No, just the first show was sentimental. And then we did like Hollow Whenever there, which was this thing with a club Punchline that I was doing with Max from Stanchick. And yeah, that was a fun time because it was like, it wasn't Halloween, but we just wanted to do a Halloween show like 2 weeks after Halloween. So
sure,
that's why we called it Hollow Whenever. And we had like pumpkins in the back and like, you know, pumpkin smashing, and it was just so much fun. And then at the Mirror, I gotta say, like our show there in April, I mean, we have one there tonight, so hopefully that's gonna be the answer after that. We played a show there in April. I flew out again from New York, and it was just great to like come back and see everyone. Like that was like the last shows of the Mirror, so it was just a very like bittersweet moment. Like, you know, pretty much like the best of the Mirror was playing, so the bands were all great, everyone was just there, and it just felt like, I don't know, ever since I moved out of Champaign, I've definitely felt the loss of like the community I had here in the music scene. A lot of my friends are in Chicago, so I wish I was working there because it'd be easier to see them, but it was really like reminded me of like why I loved being in the music scene so much, and, you know, convinced me to like keep Decap around. Like I was kind of unsure what was going to happen after I moved, but after those shows, I think we were pretty sure that we were going to keep doing stuff.
You're living currently in New York.
So I'm living in Connecticut. I just say New York. It's an hour away from New York, so it's the part of Connecticut that's like really commutable to the city.
Right. Are you finding a music community out there?
It's tough. Like I definitely like know of, my girlfriend and I are both really into the Screamo scene there. So we go to a lot of Screamo shows, both in the city and also in New Brunswick, which is like a college town, Rutgers. They have good shows. I know a few bands there. We played with them when we did, Decap did like a weekender, like one in Boston, one in New York City. So we played with a few bands that I've met through the scene there. But as far as like forming my own band, it's difficult. Like if you've ever tried to form a band, you just know it's very difficult to find people that, number one, you like, number two, you like their musical influences, and number three, they're actually effective and easy to work with and play with. That is so difficult. So
sure,
I haven't been there long enough to really lock in, and I also have work and I have all this stuff now that I'm a quote unquote real adult, so that gets in the way of things.
I was going to jokingly say like, and then after all that, you have to find a drummer. But
yeah, so, that is the hardest part. It's always the drummer. Yeah.
Well, and I would say second, probably bassist.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But Issa plays bass, so.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. But I mean, in general, like, I just feel like it's always like drums, bass, you know, those are always, I don't know.
Rhythm section is difficult.
Anyway,
yeah.
With all that in mind, I mean, I've always thought that the Champaign-Urbana scene has something special, but I mean, what do you think makes a good music scene?
I've had this discussion with my drummer, Julian, who has a very strong feeling about this, and I think he's right. He said cheap rent, because people actually have houses that they can throw shows in. In New York, it's like everything is typically more established venues, a lot of which are, especially the smaller ones, can be pretty predatory in the way they charge. So we just booked a show in New York for our label Evil Gang, actually for my girlfriend's little brother who's in a deathcore band, and the deposit was like $400. So it's like, it's not easy to book like small shows in a city like New York when the rents are like, you know, upwards of $3,000 for a studio apartment. You know, in Champaign, it's very different, right? You can get a nice house for very cheap. And in Chicago, it's almost like that too. It's definitely more expensive in Chicago, but still, the New York scene is great in its own way. But as far as building an actual community, I think it needs to start from the house shows, and it needs to start from a place of cheap rent, which is just not very common in the US. But it's more than cheap rent. You have to have cheap rent and a population of people who actually want to make music that, in my opinion, is different, is not like the same as what everyone else is doing. Because there's a lot of scenes everywhere, even if they're in big cities, even if they are in places with cheap rent, right? Where they're just, every band is not necessarily a cover band, but they're effectively a cover band because they're playing something that someone else has already done. That's difficult now that there's so many different styles out there and everyone has done everything. Like, that's true, I guess. But I still think there's always room to like be creative. I think it's quite rare to have people around you that are creative. So that's kind of just luck. Like, are you around people who are willing to be out there in terms of like their creativity and express themselves in a way that like isn't just, oh, I want to sound like this, which I admit I do that sometimes too, but more people who are like really committed to just music as an art form. Like it's just that as like, are those people there? And I think in Urbana they have been historically. I mean, you have a lot of great bands that have come out here, and there still are a lot of great bands here. So I guess Urbana just having that like, tradition, like I guess probably even before American football, but that's American Football Hum and all those guys, like the earliest I can think of, just being a city for creative musicians and having a great music scene, like that's, I think, has just carried on. So,
and I guess I'd never thought about that in terms of money being a barrier for whether something can take place or not. But I mean, that definitely speaks to accessibility, right?
Yeah.
To how is it possible for people to have a venue that doesn't like rip them off?
Because I think a lot of people making the most creative and interesting music are very young, like younger than me, like 17, 18-year-old kids. That's like the unfiltered creativity, unfiltered passion. It's not like you lose that. Like there's plenty of bands who have been great, like, and their members are quite old at this point, but I think it is more common to kind of not care what people think of you when you're a young person and just like be yourself. And young people just don't have money. Like that's the thing. Like it's, young people can play shows in New York, but typically it's like, they have to have some sort of financial backing for them to be able to do that. It is just a different world out there when the rent is so expensive.
What do you think Champaign could do better as a community?
It's hard to compare it to anything else because I feel like it is genuinely one of the best music scenes like in the country, like college scenes. I think there's always going to be a lot of people who just are making music for the wrong reasons and are going to shows for the wrong reasons. Like I'm not one to say, oh, you can't go to a show for, like, I don't mean it that way. I just feel like there's still a lot of this party atmosphere to any sort of college music scene. Some people are just legitimately just going there to get drunk and have fun, which I guess I can't hate, but it does somewhat dilute the way music as an art is seen and it's performed, and it does kind of result in these supposedly DIY venues adopting the same kind of monetary practices as a place in New York would, where they're like taking 40%, or 50%. And it's not done for the love of music. It feels like it's done because the shrewd kids know they can make money off people wanting to party. That is always going to be there. And I can't say like, you guys need to stop doing this right now, because no one's going to stop. It's always going to be there. It's just some people are making DIY venues for different reasons. But I will say, like, if you're going to make a venue, for me, and this might be privileged because I've never done a venue and I'm a band, this is from the band perspective, I do feel like it's like a charity thing. Right. You should think about it because you love music and because you want to give bands an opportunity, and you're not going to make money off it. If you think you're going to make money, then it ends up creating a lot of animosity, because like not every band needs the money. It's more about respect. It's more about like, even if you can't give bands like $1,000 paychecks every night, it's more like, do you respect the band? Are you setting up for them? Are you taking time out of your day to really make their experience like easy? Because it is so hard especially if you're a touring band coming from a random state, you've never been to Urbana before, and you show up and no one's helping you with anything. That is so difficult. And that's just the state of like so many DIY venues, especially the ones that are focused on making money. I think there's definitely a lot, like I've already mentioned the names of a few venues that don't do that, but it is, for the people doing that, I would say just join a frat or something. Like don't run a DIY venue if you're trying to make money. Like it should be a passion project. Think of the bands are in a way doing a lot, like especially touring bands are probably losing money half the time. So it's charity in, charity out. Like it's all about goodwill, and just like, it's very unlikely any of these people are going to get famous off of this. It's just for fun, right? It's just to be for the love of the craft.
Champaign is Also a Band podcast is proud to support Exile on Main Street. Exile on Main Street, located in the old train station building at 100 North Chestnut Street in downtown Champaign, has been helping to build record collections since 2004. Carrying a wide array of new and used LPs, CDs, and video games. Exile on Main Street has something for just about any music enthusiast and old-school gaming devotee. Exile also hosts regular free live music shows on its stage, so be sure to check out their Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for the up-to-date details on the next upcoming event. Open 7 days a week, they can be reached by phone at 217-398-MAIN. That's 217-398-6246. Welcome back. Joe, what is your favorite non-musical thing or things?
Ooh, the things made it more difficult. If I had to pick one, I would say history. It's weird, I guess, coming from a computer science major, but if I didn't care about like finding a job, making money, 100% I'd be a history major, 100%. It's just more difficult to like actually make a career out of that, and I know that. That's why I didn't do it. But yeah, I love history. Like I spend almost all of my downtime where I'm not hanging out with someone watching history videos on YouTube. And yeah, I'm like a huge history nerd. I love playing like history video games like Civilization and Europa Universalis, Hearts of Iron, like all that kind of stuff. Recently, I've been really into like World War One. I want to know exactly what happened during World War One, like everything. So I'm watching this series that's like going week by week, like every week in World War One, just because I find it so interesting. World War One is such like a pointless, like horrible, dumb war that was fought like because it was basically a modern war fought with like 19th 18th century ideas, and it's just like it's just so horrifying, but it's like a car crash that you can't stop but watch. That's how I feel about World War One. Understanding history to me makes me feel like I can understand people better. Everyone has trouble understanding people. That's something for me. It's like I feel like I get a better idea of what human nature is like. I see the same kind of things happening over and over. People say like history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. I mean, to me, it kind of delves at this deeper desire to understand like why do humans act the way they do, and like if you see what happens to our history, like, you kind of like understand what the driving force behind humans and things like, are we charitable or are we not? Like I think humans are just like such a complicated mess, and decoding that is I think partly why I love history. I also just think it's super interesting because it's essentially like really fun stories, but real. Like it's actually happened. So you can see the effect of the story on your actual life. Like you walk out and you do whatever in your day, or you face all these problems and you have all like everything is a result of everything that came before you. And like knowing all that to me makes me feel like I can understand the world better, but it's frankly just interesting. I guess beyond history, let me think. I really like food. I just love eating food. I got really into like eating all different types of food in Champaign because they have really good Chinese food here. I had a really good Afghan place that closed, Afghan cuisine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I just love food. Like I've always loved food. I've always loved trying new things. Well, that goes hand in hand with like traveling and also learning languages. Sure. So I've been trying to get fluent in both Mandarin, Chinese, and Spanish. So there's a little Chinese and Spanish on the album, actually. Okay. But yeah, I went to Taiwan to study abroad, so that my Chinese at this point is probably better than my Spanish, which is embarrassing because my mom was from Argentina and my dad is also American, but he's fluent in Spanish. So it's like, it's at home for me, but I just like never like, oh wow. Because my parents mostly speak to me in English. So it's like, yeah. Right. But, right. Yeah. I like just like learning a lot of different stuff language wise and like learning about the world. I feel like all that history, food, and language, like it's all related. Like it's just I want to learn about the world. I want to like understand like the human experience across every culture and like, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you've already mentioned like your career or your pursuit in academics. Was computer science. Yes. So, I mean, you're already thinking about things in kind of a language based kind of way. No, that's true. So in order to drive something, it is language that pushes it forward, whatever you want to, if you want to call it a programming language. So I just think that's interesting. I mean, basically the if then therefore kind of thought of history versus having language itself is what drives it, either to explain it or what created the conflict in the first place, right? So I don't know. From what you said, I can understand the Spanish, but why Mandarin Chinese?
Purely pragmatic. So when I went to high school, it was a very rigorous curriculum, and they didn't want us to take classes in a language that we already knew or spoke at home. And technically, I spoke Spanish at home, although I wasn't fluent. So they said you have to pick something else. My older brother was doing Mandarin Chinese, and for me, I think of learning languages as like, I could learn like Portuguese. I mean, Portuguese spoken by like, okay, I could learn like, I'm trying to think of a language that's not like Finnish or something, right? I could learn Hungarian, but I'm not gonna be able to practice it. Like practically, it's going to be really hard for me to like leverage it. But Chinese and Spanish, I think you can both kind of practice in the US, like at restaurants or like with people, because there's a lot of those speakers in the world and in the US. So yeah, I decided like my brother was taking Chinese already. He said it was a fun class. He said it was pretty easy. So I was like, yeah, surprisingly, Chinese wasn't that hard at my school. Like it was one of the easier language classes. Really? And I personally just for some reason found it very easy compared to like even Spanish. I feel like my pronunciation in Chinese is better, but I don't know. Like maybe that's not true. I guess what I hear from both native Chinese and Spanish speakers is that my pronunciation in Chinese is pretty good, but like Spanish is like still kind of so-so. So strange. I don't know.
Joe, thank you for being on the show and talking about your song Scandinavian Wahhabism, and then just talking about the Champaign-Urbana scene, the mirror, the spice rack, and also your favorite non-musical things. So I appreciate you coming all the way out here and telling me all about it.
For sure. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening to Champaign is Also Banned podcast. This is Joe Carr from Decapitation in the Food Court reminding you, great music is out there. Go find it where you live.
That's a wrap.
Champaign is also a band.
You almost have an NPR voice. It's so good.
Studio South Speaker on the inside.
I don't know. Just join a frat or something.